The popular Hindu image of a Purusha, literally a cosmic man creator, reclining on the back of a lotus dragon, eventually migrated from the Deccan plateau of India to the valley of the Irrawaddy River in Burma by the 8th century, where the Hindu trinity, as you can see, springs eternally from the lotus navel of Vishnu. This stalk is embodied by the god of birth, of growth and death. And then onward to Cambodia by the 12th century, we encounter a portrayal of Vishnu as Padmanabha, the lotus-naveled god, at Bante Samre. It actually turns out that sculpted stone in Cambodia provides some of the most detailed and, I think, informative visual interpretations of Indian mythology in the whole world, mostly because temples of Southeast Asia never actually suffered onslaughts of Islamic iconoclasm, as did the subcontinent of India. Interestingly, the labyrinthine coils of the cosmic dragon at Bante Samre are replaced with a stiff-bodied, boat-shaped serpent that transports the cosmic man, as well as his devotees, to the yonder shores of Brahma bliss. The detail calls to mind the repeated allusions to one's crossing of life's river of suffering, that would be samsara, into a state of somic ecstasy in earlier Vedic and Vedantic scriptures. So what we observe here is basically Vedic Soma as the metaphorical Aryan light-beaming ship of truth. In Brahmanic epics and the Puranas, serpents are often described as both a cause and an effect of material creation. That's one of the great mysteries of the universal soul. The soul is behind birth, begetting destruction, and destruction making way for the possibility of more rebirths. The image recalls a brief passage from the Vishnu Purana. This dragon represents the transcendent aspect of nature, prakriti, the wholeness of the causal stage of consciousness, and time's everlasting endless revolutions. But the creative impacts of an immortal dragon's serpent-magic, that being a serpent's ahi maya, serpent powers of magic, of the Vedas and the late Puranas, are also susceptible to a dragon's countervailing ability to destroy creatures and their material illusions. These mythic themes are implied generically on countless low-relief images above the doorways of abandoned temples in Angkor's famous temple complex. So here the ubiquitous seven-hooded serpent symbolizes a lotus rhizome that uplifts 7 full-blown blossoms during an annual lotus cycle, each flower positioning itself as a medallion on the cobra's hoods and on each serpent head as a floral crown. Much like the serpent demons of the Vedas, the Nagas of classical Indian mythology tend to congregate in clans or broods. Included among their numbers are a number of famous Vedic dragons, such as Ekapad, the one-footed serpent, Vishvarupa, the all-form serpent, or Nahusha, Aja, and Airavata. These prehistoric dragons joined the ranks of countless new members of the serpent broods in the epics and Puranas. Later mythic tales, some of these serpents bearing the titles of Padma, which means lotus, lotus dragon, or Padmanabha, lotus-naveled dragon, Pushpa, another name of these serpents, which name means lotus, Kumuda, which is a white lotus, Kapila, which is a pink flowered lotus, or some serpents are named Kadru, Soma chalice, or Kalasha, meaning the Soma vessel. Obviously, lotus dragons are just as fond of Soma as their mythical allies and adversaries, judging from their names. Like their Vedic antecedents, classical Nagas tend to congregate in the dark underworld of rivers and lakes. sometimes in a gem-laden paradise of lotus groves called Patala. Early accounts of these Naga lands, known in Sanskrit as Nagalokas or Nagapura, state that the devas deposit the residues of their soma sacrifices in this region of the earth after they have taken their fill of the mortalizing nectar of the gods. And other hymns inform us that emaciated sages, the rishis, convene in this aquatic underworld to study and recite the Vedas. And the Nagas apparently take full advantage of the residues of soma, since their numerous eyes and hoods are said to sway in intoxication after partaking of soma juice. Like Vedic Vritas, Hindu Nagas must have access to Amrita in order to maintain their mortal lives. This concept is implied in the visual arts by placing soma vessels in the proximity of the creatures. Or an indirect association has already been noted on the famous relief of the Dasavatara temple at Deogar, in which lotus-throned Brahma carries a flask of the elixir as he rises from Vishnu's serpent form. A variation on this theme is observed at the Tusahiti sanctuary in Patan, Nepal, where Vishnu sits upon the coils of a 1,000-headed serpent. He bears a flowering lotus stalk in his outstretched right hand and an urn of soma in the other. Vishnu is clearly in an ecstatic state of mind here, as an aura of spiritual fires envelops his body. In Hindu mythology, animal aspects of the gods of the earth and sky, such as Garuda, the sunbird vehicle of Vishnu, and his serpent enemies, are reborn to the world on the basis of their former actions, just like us, the mortals. That would be their karma, actions. This general idea applies equally to all living creatures, in that we all reap what we sow. Solomon would be right at home with the doctrine of karma. We all reap the phala, the fruits of our actions. As they say in the Mahabharata, whether this life or the next, karma must bear fruit. So the fate of a dark and deceitful dragon is to live and to die in the mire of the earth, and to be reborn again and again in the womb of a serpent, until selfless and empathetic actions, karma, allows for an eventual birth in a more auspicious womb. Conversely, the heroic and immortal status of Garuda, that would be Garutman in the Vedas, the Vedic sunbird, is earned by a selfless dedication to the gods and the creature's generous willingness to share soma, the drink, with his comrades in arms, these being the heavenly host, the devas. Countless myths and doctrinal texts assert that the abandonment of desirous and egotistical actions over the course of many lives is required to achieve a full comprehension of Brahman, and that this understanding allows the Atman, the soul of an individual, to transcend the cycles of rebirth and attain the station of a deva, immortality, if not the attainment of total liberation, which is beyond, in fact, the world of the gods. Now, Shesha, the serpent incarnation of Vishnu between time cycles, is exceptional in this regard, in that this cosmic serpent earned the title of truth, that would be Dharma, for having supported the earth during the initiation of a lotus cycle. He accomplished this feat by shedding his old skin and leaving behind the remnants of his delusional past. This theological theme applies equally to humans, in that we, the deluded, are said to shed our bodies at the end of our lives in the same manner that cosmic dragons shed their slough to renew their support of lotus flowers. Or in the words of the Bhagavad Gita, as a man, casting off old clothes, puts on others and new ones, so the embodied self, casting off old bodies, goes to others and to new ones. Soma Pavamana himself, as a serpent in the Rig Veda, shared the same behavior when he slows his ancient skin to raise his golden pillars. Hindu philosophy conserves the Upanishadic premise that the Atman, each person's soul, is imperishable and unchangeable, and that this spirit passes through a series of impermanent material states, forms, before discovering its true identity as Brahman, the self's transcendental condition, if you will. Again, to quote the Bhagavad Gita, the Atman is not born, nor does it ever die, nor having existed will it ever die. Unborn, eternal, everlasting, this ancient one is not slain when the body is slain. This is because the Atman is the universal soul, Brahman. Thus, according to a Brahmanic worldview, urges to live and return to life are driven by a creature's delusion that we as individual creatures are unique and sovereign beings, and thus we recognize our distinctive names and forms, our nama and rupa. This might be the name and form of a serpent, an eagle, a cow, an elephant, beggar, or sage. But name and form doesn't matter. Only the Atman, which is unborn and unchanging. This delusion, then, of individuality is created in us by Vishnu's Maya, his potent and peculiar power that returns the Atman back into the wheel of life and time again and again until the delusional veil of the material world is removed by Vishnu in his supernal form as the sacred lotus. Such are the doctrines of the Hindus. We are reminded repeatedly of this doctrine in the Upanishads, and the Puranas pick up this theme to frame the concept in a mythic context. The transmigration of the universal soul between living forms in sacred lotus groves is a theme that runs throughout a rather lengthy myth entitled the Gajendramoksha story, the liberation, moksha, of Gajendra. The tale describes how an elephant king once achieved emancipation from the cycles of rebirth by maintaining his unstinting faith in Lord Hari, Vishnu. For Gajendra was once upon a time a great king of India, who became the victim of a curse from an angry sage during a former lifetime. It so happens that the king had once fallen deeply into a meditative trance, under which state he failed one day to greet and pay respect to a passing Brahmin. The wandering holy man assumed that the unseemly behavior of the king was meant as an insult, and therefore ordained that the king be born in his next life as a dull-witted elephant. And sure enough, this came to pass. In fact, Gajendra willingly entered into the blinding darkness of this animal's ignorance, since he believed that every man's fate is defined by divine providence. And as a reward for Gajendra's faith in Vishnu, it turns out that this sage is destined to achieve final release, moksha, from rebirth during his incarnation as an elephant king, Gajendra. The Bhagavata Purana describes Gajendra's life as follows. On a large and beautiful mountain that was surrounded by the milky ocean, there once lived an elephant king by the name of Gajendra. He and his roving band of female companions wandered the valleys of a land with many rivers and ponds, each filled with golden lotuses and water lilies of the blue and white varieties. The clear air of this wondrous land resonated with the humming of intoxicated bees and the melodious notes of warbling birds. One fateful day, as the bull elephant was passing across his territories, he sensed the sweet aroma of a lake that was filled with lotus blossoms. So, with eyes rolling with intoxication and a mouth that panted for water, the beast approached the lake's heavenly shores in great haste, and then plunged into its alluring waters. Gajendra dipped the tip of his trunk into those translucent, nectar-like liquids, and drank his fill of waters that were perfumed with the pollen of golden and blue lotuses. But this elephant king and his roving companions were sorely deluded by the Maya of Vishnu, and were completely unaware of a serpent that lurked deep beneath the surface of the lake. In due course, the elephant king was, in fact, grasped around the legs by the coils of this deadly dragon. Try as he might, Gajendra could not extricate himself from the serpent's death grip, even after 1,000 years of struggle. So the despondent creature accepted his misfortunes as a matter of fate, and proceeded to plead to the Supreme Lord Hari, that Golden One, for final deliverance. Beginning with the utterance of the sacred syllable Om, Gajendra prayed that the self-illuminating Lord of cause and effect, that deluding potency of Maya in the universe, might grant him protection. And by acknowledging that the Creator was beyond the comprehension of all the gods and mortals, that asylum can only be found in the Creator of the world, and that the true pervading spirit of existence is without karma, actions, and material bondage, Gajendra affirmed the potency of his Lord's Maya was responsible for the creation and destruction of the illusory worlds of nature. So the bull elephant paid homage to the Lord of moksha, of liberation from worldly delusions, and Vishnu's dreams of birth, sustenance, and death. Gajendra prayed that his creator might liberate him from the coils of the titanic snake. But he knew also that his destiny had surely been dictated by his bondage to the 3 cycles of life, the triguna, birth, sustenance, and death, and by his ignorance of the Atman. Verily, this elephant's ego sense had yet to fully comprehend the universal self. Upon hearing the confessions of Gajendra, Vishnu descended from the heavens on the flaming wings of Garuda, his vehicle, the solar eagle, as if the god was the very embodiment of the Vedas. Lord Hari appeared with the famous golden disc, his golden chakra known as Sudarshana, in hand, and prepared himself to do battle with the dragon of the deep. In acknowledging the presence of his Lord, the Creator, Gajendra urgently pulled some lotus blossoms from the waters of the lake and held them before Lord Hari, proclaiming, "Glorious Narayana, Father of the universe, I bow to you." And immediately, in recognition of Gajendra's devotions, Lord Hari took pity on his disciple and cast his disc into the jaws of the reptile, thereby extracting the exhausted elephant from his entrapment in the waters of material existence. As the gods rejoiced and the heavenly minstrels, the Gandharvas, sang, sages throughout the land arose to celebrate the great act of Vishnu. The serpent himself changed back into his original form as a celestial water sprite, achieving his own redemption from a curse that was rendered by an angered sage in one of his past lives. And Gajendra, that dull-witted elephant king, attained to moksha, final release. The saga of Gajendra's rapture is paradoxical. We are told in this myth that the powers of Vishnu's Maya, to delude, are also capable of emancipating. Paradise must be lost in order to be gained. And the all, Brahman, can only be achieved by abandoning the delusion of a personal self. Gajendra's attainment of moksha takes place in the middle of a lotus grove, where light and darkness convene, where serpents and eagles clash, and where dreamy delusions become ultimate realities. The scene is portrayed on a splendid relief of the Dasavatara temple in central India, where the dragon of the deep in Gajendra's saga is recognized as a product of Vishnu's Maya. And yet, the Devic aspect of the god descends from the heavens on the back of a quasi-personified eagle, Garuda by name, his vehicle, to remove the desperate elephant from the grips of material delusion. The uplifted arm of Vishnu, now damaged, probably carried the solar disk, the lotus chakra known as the Sudarshana, which Vishnu hurls into the jaws of this particular serpent demon. This, we may recall, is the same method that Indra and Soma employ in the Vedas as serpent slayers to vanquish Vritra and his serpent Maya. Other elements of the imagery are obviously Vedic in origin as well, since the god Soma Pavamana also exhibits the same combination of animalian aspects, i.e., a serpent, an eagle, and an elephant. The symbolic connections between divine elephants and serpents also calls to mind the close associations between the naga and elephant in early Sungan iconography at Sanchi in central India, where an Ophidian, Mukara, frequently possesses a trunk and or a head of an elephant, along with a crocodile's mouth and a fish fin ear. Massive elephants of India have long been acknowledged as symbols of power, for obvious reasons. We recall, for example, a prehistoric hymn dedicated to Vedic Soma that likens this plant god to a rushing elephant when he is maddened by heat and when he's drinking his ambrosial juices. But the symbolic relationship between the lotus and elephant are more frequently applied to the Vedic storm god Indra, the wielder of the thunderbolt in both Vedic and classical Indian mythology. In post-Vedic eras, Indra mounts a three-headed white elephant by the name of Airavata to engage in battle with the serpent demons. The close association of these three symbolic forms, the bolt, the elephant, and lotus flower, are observed at the entrance of Angkor Thom in central Cambodia, where the famous six-tusker of Indra, Airavata, dips his trunk into the pure waters of Indra's paradise. Not so unlike Gajendra, when he discovered his lake full of lotus flowers. But Indra is never subdued by a serpent, because he upholds his invincible thunderbolt. The Indra-elephant-lotus associations often include symbolic attributes that associate the thunder god with the lotus blossom's nectar of immortality. At Deogar, once again in central India, celestial elephants bathe the consort of Vishnu, that would be Sri Lakshmi, with the immortalizing contents of soma vessels. They pour the elixir from their lotus podiums as the goddess sits in a lotus position upon her lotus throne. Above the scene, a large soma vessel overbrims with the nectar of immortality, upon which a lotus flower is floating